So, Daryl Urbanski, thank you so much for joining me on the Vertical Farming Podcast.
Yeah, it's an honor and a pleasure to be here.
So, we're doing a bit of an interview swap because you were so gracious to have me as a guest on your show a couple of weeks ago, and I will make sure we link to that. And that was more entrepreneur focused because I know you work with entrepreneurs. But during that conversation, you started mentioning another side project, which I felt might have a little bit of interest to this audience. Obviously, the focus on this show is for folks that are interested in the world of vertical farming, and that could be anyone starting with like a tower in their kitchen to full-blown factories that are being built and everything in between, container farms, modular units as well. And you mentioned there's an aspect to that to the project you're working on. So let's start for some context about folks, a little bit about your background. You don't have to go into the whole resume, but talk a little bit to just to kind of like what makes Daryl Daryl.
What makes Daryl Daryl? That's a great question because I always say everything I'm not made me everything I am. So, hi, I'm Daryl. I'm Canadian living in the Philippines. I was an orphan that was adopted, that then had his adopted father die, and then was raised by his stepdad. But it was kind of a Cinderella story because they ended up having their own children. And so no one was really going to pay for me to go to university, and there was no real guidance or direction. I mean, I got no complaints. I had a good middle class upbringing, suburbia, clothes on my back, food on the table, roof over my head. So I was very fortunate compared to a lot of people. But I spent a lot of my life kind of like, why? Like walking around almost like that kid. Are you my mother? Like, why? Who am I? What am I here for? What's going on? And I've done a lot of things. I've hitchhiked across Canada 6 times. I've climbed Mount Fuji. I speak English, French, Japanese at intermediate levels. I'm learning Tagalog now. I speak a little bit of French. I've traveled the world a couple of times over. And I feel like I've always been obsessed about getting to the heart of the matter. That's probably a good way to put it. I remember I worked as a teen. I was working at some sort of call center. We were selling tickets to the circus to fundraise for the police. And I remember showing up to work one day and everyone was being laid off, like they were closing down shop, moving. I remember at that point, I decided I never want to be the last person to get the news ever. So at that point, I decided whenever I work somewhere, I want to be able to, the spigot is coming out of the mountain. Like wherever that hot spring comes out, I don't want to be the person at the end of the river that's getting the river that everyone's like thrown their dirty laundry water in and, defecated in. I want to be right at the source. And so, and as a co-op, in high school, I did 2 weeks with a company called marketme.ca and bizbound.ca, which were startup support companies. Well, one was a marketing agency, the other one was like a startup incubator, I guess you could say. And that was what I did in my high school. And so ever since then, I've been very, startup esque. And I'd say at this point, I probably spent over 17 years helping businesses get customers and keep them. A lot of what I do has been online, but I've built brick and mortar businesses. My claim to fame is I helped turn a company around from on the verge of bankruptcy to doing $1.6 million in under 8 months with a single online automated strategy, over $3 million, including back end sales as a whole. So I've been kind of beating that drum for a while. COVID was a big wake up call because I think a lot of people were just kind of living their lives. And then all of a sudden, like for me, my family and I got locked in condos twice for 2 weeks. And so I said, never again. And so we're never going to live in an apartment or a condo again after that. Because, the second time it happened, it was some guy on the 26th floor. Like he did something, like I do believe that it was a small emergency that was made into a big emergency for obscene amount of profit. But even still, it very much made me want more control over my life. And so things that I was just interested in became serious priorities for me. So since then, it's like, I'm a big fan of Bitcoin simply because no government can shut your bank account down. No one can stop you from sending money to anybody. Like, I believe that I'm a sovereign individual. I don't necessarily believe like governments have no control, like, and my birth certificate is a legal rain jacket. I don't know about all that stuff, but I'm me and I have my own rights. And I think the rights of the individual matter more than the collective whole because that's how we protect. It's the whole concept that I can do whatever I want in my bubble as long as I'm not peeing in someone else's pool. And that really led me, now that I have kids and stuff, that really led me to want to make sure my family's okay. And I think that the path of freedom truly is self-reliance in terms of being successful at operating your own small business, because then you have something to trade and it's not like you're under someone's thumb. Like, a job is just a business with one customer, your boss, and one product, your time. And that's not scalable. And days and weekends or holidays, like, if you go to McDonald's, they're never like, hey, sorry, Sally needed a personal day, so drive-throughs closed. Like, no, that's not it. The business solves a problem for the community, and there's a team that's trained up, and people can rotate into different seats to continue to provide that service. And that's what a business is to me. I'm not into these parasitic pharmaceutical companies. I think that, my teeth hurt, I go see a dentist. I'm hungry, I go to a restaurant, or I go to the market, or I'm bored, I go see a
Yeah.
movie. I think businesses solve problems. And I've always had that perspective since I was a kid. My uncle lived in Toronto, and he was a property manager and also like a small business owner. And I felt like he was the godfather. People would come to visit him and bring in gifts like, thank you so much for helping us with this. And I felt like he really took care of the community. And that's my impression of what it means to be a business owner. So I think that's freedom, because then you can earn whatever you're worth in terms of your ability to provide to the community around you and have something of value that they want and trade with them. But then aside from that, I think we got away from the principles that used to be called the American dream. I think even the Canadian dream. I mean, when they first brought the pioneers over to Canada, they said, hey, come, we'll gift you some land. Just pay some annual taxes on the property, and whatever you make of it is yours. And so the concept of owning land and living from the land, I mean, that's essentially the dream between being a small business owner, and it's lost now. Now it's about how many people can we get signed up to our subscription. My wife and I in the Philippines walking through our neighborhood, counting the houses, estimating what people are paying for electric bill. The electric bill alone, this one neighborhood is easily $500,000, if not more, per month for that electric. So it's not that we're not smart enough to figure out how to make everyone self-sufficient. It's just that it's too damn profitable to have everybody plugged in like livestock. And so I'm just a huge proponent for self-reliance and personal responsibility. And so my family and I'm going to wrap this up. I know I'm on a soapbox here, but my family and I've loved the concept of Earthships since I was a kid. I first found out about them and Michael Reynolds when I was 19. For those that don't know, an Earthship is basically a self-sufficient off-grid home. But over the years, it just wasn't feasible for me to get into one because there's a lot of challenges. And this is in no way throwing shade at Michael. I love Michael. I paid him a lot of money for consulting and stuff. But there are some major problems that people have when they're trying to get into an Earthship. One is it can be expensive. Like the cheapest model, the 2-bedroom, can be like 180,000 or more to build, depending on what you do. It can be tough to find builders that are comfortable building one because nobody's built with used tires before. It can be tough to get permits for it because they're pounding tires full of gravel and sand for the load-bearing walls, and that's not everyone's going to want to give you a permit for that. It can take a long time to build them. You see on YouTube a lot of people that their projects stalled out. They're 3 years in and they're not done yet. It's a year and a half, they're not done yet. All this sort of stuff. And then other people just don't like how they look. It's a unique style. And so now you talk about this project that brought us to the show is essentially our offer now is no money down, beautiful, luxurious home you can build in 90 days, pay off in 3 to 5 years, and be food, power, water, self-sufficient, retire in 5 years or less. And that's essentially the offer with the Oasis Biohome that we've developed.
Thanks for that context and that background.
Yeah.
I think it's helpful because if people want to understand how you got to where you are, I think that background of what your life was like and the things changes you're seeing in the world made you think differently than most people do. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's, that leads to, the businesses that you started, the ventures you've looked into, and even looked into like these earth homes. So the company has a bunch of different models, but as we were talking,
Yeah.
I thought what was interesting about the Oasis was the ability to have a portion of it dedicated to growing your own food
Right.
indoors. So
Right.
can you talk a little bit about that and what it was that you liked about that?
So, in trying to figure out how to solve this problem for myself, because again, I'm in the business of freedom. So, I'm already coaching, helping business owners. Like you mentioned, I have the podcast. That's how we met. How to achieve freedom through their business, time freedom, some degree of financial freedom. And I was trying to figure out how do we solve the housing crisis? How do we solve the self-reliant living crisis? And I was trying to figure out how to fix and innovate on the Earthship. And I came across this company, Wonderful Structures, who had this model called an Echo Green, which is like a little hobbit house. And so ultimately, I ended up talking to them, and we managed to form a partnership where we basically took their Echo Green model and then modernized it to include solar power systems, rainwater collection systems, and then a gray water garden system. So what this means is that the bathroom shower drain, the bathroom sink drain, and the utility room washing machine drain all run the gray water into 4 indoor garden beds that are gravel, sand, dirt. The idea being that the main reason why there's 2 types of wastewater from a house. One's gray water, one's black water is your sewage, and even maybe kitchen sink because you get oils and all sorts of stuff in there. But shower, laundry, it's soap, maybe some hair or lint, and maybe a little bit of urine from time to time. But ultimately, it's mostly soap. And if anything, some fibers. And the reason why that's pollution is when you put that out into a lake or a stream or a pond or a river, is that it causes the plant life to grow and it upsets the natural balance between animal and plant life. Because the main, like, gray water soap is full of nitrogen and phosphate, which is ultimately fertilizer, but it's not pre-filtered. Like when you go buy fertilizer from the store, you got your whatever, your numbers, right? This isn't that. It's whatever, depending on the type you're using, it's a bit of a wild card. So you can garden with this though. If you pump this in the 4 garden pools that we have, the first one you have to plant hardier plants because they're getting it fresh. So you need hardier plants, but you can plant herbs, you can plant all sorts of hardy types of food crops even. The second garden bed we say should be a salad bar, which are, your leafy greens and that, shallow roots, but it still gives a chance for the bacteria in the roots to help, treat the water, convert, not treat, but well, maybe filter the water out, right? And then when you get to the third and the fourth, you can plant anything. You can plant your green peppers, your tomatoes. And so, again, there's a lot of people that do this sort of thing with their washing machines in their backyards. They just have the pipe go to their garden and it works. It works incredibly well. Once you figure out, which plants work best for you. And so this is, again, we really haven't updated our building materials. We haven't really updated how we're setting people up to live. I think there's a lot of people on this show that I think it is work to grow some food, to have, a vertical garden. But once you get it, I mean, the plants do all the work, essentially, right? So it's not that it's impossible. It's that it hasn't been profitable to encourage. What does it say? No one's going to give you the education you need to overthrow them or their control over you. And I'm not trying to, I don't want to make this like the world's a malicious place. But, we farm food crops for food. People herd livestock. They farm livestock for meat and profit. Governments farm people. Someone's got 5 like 30-story condominiums in a little circle with a gym and a grocery store. Guess what they're farming? You. That's what they're farming. Like, you are their product. You are their paying. And I had this talk in Singapore, a business luncheon. I guess I organized and hosted it. We had about a dozen business leaders come to this lunch meeting in Singapore. And I was talking, and this one said, well, Singapore's got the highest percentage of home ownership in all of Southeast Asia. And I go, do you mean condos? And he said, yes. And I asked him, how many months can you not pay your condo fee before they take your condo from you? And everybody laughed and was like, I don't know, 6-8 months. And I said, well, I guess it's not really yours then, is it? Right? Like, you just, if you're not paying those condo fees, the electric bill, the water bill, are you really free? Whereas our smallest model of the Oasis Biohome, comes with a solar kit. The whole building's designed to collect rainwater and put it into cisterns for you. And, the smallest model, between the house itself and the cost to build it, you could probably get it done all in for about 100 grand, 120 grand. And if you're paying 3 grand a month right now between rent, power, water, you get this built in 90 days, you move in, 3 grand a month will pay it off in 2.8 years. And now you're free. You've got your solar panels have a 30-year warranty. The battery's got a 10-year warranty. The inverter, a 3-year warranty. Hasn't stopped raining on the planet yet. So water's going to be coming. We can store a month of water for you. And you can even grow a small amount of food just by taking a shower. All you have to do is plant, prune, pick, and spray neem oil to, and take care of pests from time to time. And you don't have to worry about watering it.
Talk a little bit, obviously, given the nature of this show, talk a little bit about the focus of what experience you've had with growing anything, or is it still more in the planning stages? Because I'm curious, like, if people want to think practically about what can be grown. Obviously, we've talked about the range of things that, I've had so many folks on the show grow everything from leafy greens to fodder to hops for beer, but it's been interesting to see, like, with varying results. So I'm curious if, what the thoughts are for what people would be growing or could consider growing in this environment.
Yeah, great question. So, I mean, obviously it depends on the person. Some people, they're not, because it's work to grow food, right? So some people may just want to plant some rose bushes and call it a day. And so for us, at the time of this recording, we've only recently launched this model less than a month ago, but we've already lined up something like 7 distributors for it. There's a guy in Saudi Arabia that wants to talk about setting up a factory. But in terms of what's possible to be grown, if you look at what Earthships have been doing, because again, we consulted with Michael Reynolds on this isn't necessarily something new, The Wonderful Structure's been building these prefabricated hobbit homes for 20 years. Earthship's been doing off-grid self-sufficient homes for 55 years. And what they build is everything from mango trees, banana. Like they have, I think there's an Earthship in Canada that's growing mangoes in the middle of winter because essentially you maintain the internal temperature, right? It's like the comfortable whatever you're at. I mean, if you're like me, you probably want it like 24 degrees. If you're like my wife, you want it at 32 degrees. It just depends on the person, right? So you kind of can make your own climate. And as long as you've got, nutrients, water, sunlight, it depends. Unless it's something like maybe like blueberries where they need the cold, the frost. Essentially, you can grow almost anything in these. You would typically want, in my mind, to something that's low maintenance. So I always advocate for permaculture crops. I'm a big fan for permaculture. But there's one lady, she wants to buy one of these Oasis Biohomes to set up a rock museum. She loves rocks. She wants to not use grass on the outside of the house. She just wants to put her rocks on it. So when people drive up, they can see that. And for her, she's just going to have the inside be like nice flowers, like maybe something that butterflies like. And she might buy some butterflies and, be like a rock garden and butterfly sanctuary. Like she's playing around with it her way. But that's, it really depends on the person. If someone is committed and wants like a dedicated thing, this is really hot off the press, but agrocapsules.com, the company, Wonderful Structures, they actually have like a little shed that's the vertical farming garden in there. They've been using, because we have a proprietary FRP technology that they use to build the same stuff they use for spaceships and submarines. And so,
What's FRP stand for?
it's fiber. What is it? Hold on. You're calling my bluff here. Hold on.
Just want to make sure we're not losing folks.
But no, it's fiber, industrial fiberglass polymer. No, fiber
Okay.
reinforced polymer. That's what it is. It's a proprietary blend because there's lots of different fibers you can use, and there's lots of, but anyways, we've got a patented proprietary blend that resists mold, that maintains durability over the years.
Mm.
It costs a little bit more than conventional stuff up front, but the lifetime savings is exponential. So, but part of why that's relevant.
How does the Oasis relate to what you're doing with agrocapsules? Because obviously the agrocapsules like speaks directly to what people are here. So is the agrocapsules like the container, which can come in a couple of different shapes? You can have like, obviously they said the orthogonal and the arch spaces, but is that something different than what's happening with that you're working on with Oasis?
Great question. So part of what's made the partnership between me and Wonderful Structures work out so well is that, the Oasis Biohome is where they think everything's headed. So the reason why Agrocapsules matches is because if you really wanted to be self-sufficient, you could grow a small amount inside the Oasis Biohome, but you couldn't necessarily feed your family of four just from that. So
Yeah.
what do you do? And so that's where this was already a project that was in the works where they've got a couple of vertical farming companies that are trying to, this is there's lots of pop-ups that are happening there. People are trying to, I think Elon Musk brothers trying to do it in containers, right? Shipping containers. And so people wanted to use our technology because it's so lightweight, it's so durable, and we can ship it anywhere in the world, and it's fast. I mean, you put these structures together,
Yeah.
just the structure itself can be done in 3 to 5 days, right? So it makes sense to talk about or to take this technology and go, how do we do this for vertical farming? So the agrocapsules is for vertical farming specifically, and would be
Yeah.
something like someone would get a shed, and we're actually working on something that might even be like a closet. This is premature, but something for mushrooms and leafy greens that you could put in a closet space or in the utility room of the Oasis Biohome. Right now, what we've started with and launched is the modernized Earthship with the basic things that if you get this and you get some chickens, you've got subsistence living and you're good.
Yeah.
And you pay it off and you're good. Like you're free. You get the smallest model, like I said, around 100 grand for the building and to have it assembled and the concrete slab and the cisterns, what you need, maybe more, 120 grand, but you pay that off in 3 years. And now that's it. Because most people are spending 50 to 80% of their income just on rent, power, and water. I mean, that's 50 to 80% of most people's income.
Yeah.
If you didn't have to have that and you earn the same amount of money, $3,000 a month saved over 5 years is $172,000, right? I think the average net
Yeah.
worth of a homeowner is something like $64,000. But that's because everyone's on these 20, 30-year mortgages. Like this is part of what I'm talking about, why we called it the Oasis Biohome, because it's an oasis
Mm-hmm.
in the housing and affordability crisis in that. The agrocapsules.com, like I said, is just a new thing that was launched that was
Yeah.
already in progress. And when I came along was like, this is great. And it's more of like, again, someone that's looking to do vertical farming as a business, or they're trying to get their whole family. and take a look at that. And it's really just,
When I'm looking at the Agrocapsules, obviously you can see a lot of variety in terms of like the design.
yep,
Are you partnering or are you open to like having conversations with like all the different, equipment manufacturers? Because when you start talking about proper vertical
yep,
farms, you got concerns about like HVAC and power and how you're sourcing that and how you're, grow trays, lighting, there's so many
yes.
variables to make this work. And there's obviously people that have done it successfully at the container level. So I'm wondering how you're thinking about possible partnerships with the folks who have the specialty in the actual tech that goes inside.
Yeah, those people should reach out and ask. I mean, it depends to be on a case by case basis. And it depends on some of the context because this Agrocapsules thing is something that was launched because somebody had asked for a custom project saying, hey, can you use the technology you're using for houses to help me do this? And so there's actually facilities being set up with this. So this is something where we had a custom design request come in that we produced enough of them that we said, okay, maybe there's something to this. And now there's a website for it. And, and like you said, we're open to have conversations with people. But the focus of the company and of everything overall is, again, to just help take care of people. We are pro humanity and we are anti the whole population control, zero growth economy nonsense. We are the exact opposite of that. We are pro human flourishing and we're leaning in as hard as we can into that, you know?
So for you, you think about it with your business hat on, what have been some of the challenges with the Oasis and with like this new venture with Agrocapsules? Like what's, it's still an early stage company because you're just creating something to meet the needs of people that are expressed an interest in this. And obviously, if you look at some of the videos that are on the site, there's a lot of focus on, engaging people with like the videos of what's possible in terms of what you can grow inside. So what do you see as challenges in terms of getting the word out and maybe even differentiating what you do with like other, full turnkey systems? Maybe I'm just curious, kind of putting your business strategy hat on, what you see as your challenge over the next 12 months with these ventures.
Yeah, great question. So again, for me, I'm really talking to developers, distributors, and the potential home buyers for the Oasis primarily about helping get, like I said, save them and get them out of the rat race and that. And the biggest challenge for a lot of people is right now that I probably already talked to, I'd say people that have been fed to me as a potential like buyer. So they've spoken to someone who already answered questions, said, hey, this person's serious. I'd say I've probably spoken to maybe 40 plus people already in, we'll say 3-4 weeks. And a lot of people, they don't understand all the steps. So when it comes to building a home, because this is building a home, it's not a finished home that we're prefabricating and sending to you. But the builders that get it are saying that this is the closest thing to an IKEA off-grid home that there is on the market right now, in the sense of everything that we provide and ship. But a lot of people understand that there's 5 key hurdles. One is getting the land, and that's where this is really powerful because in this housing crisis, people don't understand that when you go to buy land, part of why it's so expensive is because somebody had to pay the millions to put in the infrastructure, to run sewers and water mains and power lines to that. So when you buy the land, they have to get their profit out of that. Whereas if you buy a raw land lot that's not hooked up to the grid, it's like 10 cents on the dollar. So first you have to get land. That's a hurdle. And a lot of people like, what do I do? What do I, blah, 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 blah. And there's raw land lots. I was talking to one guy, he was wanted to be in San Diego proper, like within the city limits. And we found, I think it was 300 square meter lot for something like $65,000 US
Hmm.
in San Diego,
Yeah.
because a lot of people look at raw land and I can't do anything with this
Yeah.
until we spend a couple 100,000 or millions to run sewers and water and power lines to it. So that's the big thing, I think, is getting the word out and getting people to understand and appreciate that. The second one is the builders, and the third is permits. And so the builders, when you want to do something like this, you need the land, a builder, the permits, financing, and shipping. And so those are the key 5 hurdles. And so right now, honestly, I think this is like nobody really argued about indoor plumbing. There was no real resistance. Like when someone came out with flushable toilets versus just, do it in a pot and open your door and throw it out in your yard. There was people that were just comfortable with the status quo, but there wasn't really a lot of pushback. People just thought, wow, this is great. And I would say that's been the experience with the Oasis Biohome so far. Most of the people we talk to are like you, where you hear about it, you're like, hey, you want to come on my show and talk about it? Because it's just a great solution to a really urgent, like bleeding neck type problem. There's a lot of people, like I have an aunt that got medically assisted suicide in Canada. And it's my opinion that part of why she did it was because she's retired and she didn't want to be a burden on the family. Rising costs of living. She's not, productive anymore. Nobody wants to be a burden. And there's a ton of baby boomers right now that are, entering retirement age. And a lot of them are wondering, am I going to outlive my retirement? What do I do if I out to be 88 and I can't afford electricity and I can't afford water? And so that's a huge issue. And then there's all these people that want to have families. We have a population collapse crisis on the horizon. A lot of people want to have families, but they go, great, even if I want to have kids, how do I afford it? Right? I mean, it's like 50 to $100 in energy just alone per person in the household. So, right, like that's a huge issue. And that's why I say that's why we call this the Oasis Biohome, because it's the solution. So, and then it's worldwide. So I don't know if I answered that question. I hope I'm not just trying to come across like pitching this. I'm just really an advocate for, like, people don't understand, but our what is it they say? I eat an organic food diet, or what my grandparents used to call it, just food. Like I eat only organic food, or as my grandparents used to call it, food. Like it's just food. That's what it was. And that's how people came when they settled. If you go back a generation or two, like people just owned the land. Like it was just you own the land. Like it was just a thing. There was no one that was worried about being kicked out and living under a bridge in 30 days if they didn't, like, you're paying to go to work to pay to go to work to fulfill some dream of some company or person that's not you. And that's just, anyways, I don't know if I'm going off too much on that, but the
No, I
big
understand.
hurdles.
And obviously, it all comes down to the concept of sovereignty. And I think if you wrap it under like that label, I think people can get the picture of like, this idea of having control over your food supply, having control over
Yeah,
your water. I mean, we're on a well here where I live, and that's like it's a big
it's
deal,
huge.
obviously, to have access to your own water supply. So it's something I definitely don't take for granted. Just curious, like when you get people that are expressing interest in Oasis and then specifically Agrocapsules, is there a common denominator in terms of like the types of people that are coming to you? Is it people who are developing, people who are more thinking about it as an investment, or is it people from other, are you seeing more of an influx from specific countries as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't say specific countries because we're talking to, I forget the name of the islands. It's like the Azores Islands in Portugal, Malaysia. We're talking to someone that's working with the government there. Saudi Arabia and Egypt have shown interest. We're talking to someone that's in Costa Rica, the United States. There's a guy that's in Ireland. So I don't know if it's a specific country. It's more just where we're targeting essentially and where we have existing networks. We've got New Zealand and Australia as well, some contacts there. But you're right. There are different reasons. There's the developers that have land. Like there's people that have land, but it's not on grid, and they'd love to build a community there, either for their family or to put them on Airbnbs. We have some use cases. I'm not going to share my screen because I know you mentioned before a lot of people don't get the visuals, but there's two of the Echo Green model that are put up on Airbnb. One of them's a top 5% home on Airbnb, and they're a lovely couple, but they didn't invent anything. They're not geniuses. They just built our home and put it there on the lake. And it's a top 5% home in Airbnb. It's usually fully booked, and they're charging $750 a night. There's another one that's the same
Wow.
thing. It's had 237 reviews, and it's like a 4.95 or something. Like people just love these homes. They're beautiful. So before this, talked to another person that wants to be a distributor, and that's specifically what he does is he helps people that have land, like they already have a house or something, but they have extra land, set up an Airbnb unit or like a glamping, something for glamping on their property. And that's what he was interested in because again, there's a lot of people that they've got land, but there's no utilities over there, and that's always the big challenge: is how do you get utilities to that spot?
And just to remind folks, I know there was a lot we covered in the beginning, and just to kind of bring it back for practical applications so people can understand next steps. So if you do have a land and something like the Oasis model might be a fit for that property, like walk people through like the steps, because you keep saying like referring back to connecting to utilities and being off grid, but like logistically how does that happen, and just remind people of like how the water system gets set up, and like people are thinking about this day to day living, like
Mm,
what's that going to look like once they're set up and running, like
sure,
so you know walk people like sequentially through what has to
sure,
happen.
sure, sure. And I'm sorry, I did go on a rant. To finish the question you asked before, it's typically, like I said, people that want to do an Airbnb, developers that want to develop land without having to invest in millions in infrastructure in advance, and then we're getting people that just want the sovereign freedom. There's some people they're already living remotely and they just want to be better, and there's other people that they don't care about any of that. They just want to unplug from the rat race, and that's a huge component too. As far as the process, like I said, you've got to have your land. You got to find a builder that'll help you assemble and put this, because a lot of it is conventional. That's important to state. That's part of what helps with getting the permits for this stuff as well. Is a lot of it is conventional building. The interior finishings are conventional. You're pouring a concrete slab. That's conventional. So the permits and then the financing is something a lot of people as well. Credit unions, and also we have a financing partner that can offer up to $100,000 unsecured personal loan. And so for that, if you pay it off over 10 years, it's $1,200 a month. If you pay it off over 5 years, it's $2,300 a month. And if you pay it off in 3 years, it's $3,200 a month. So the process, like I said, is typically once you got your land and a builder, you would contact us and you'd make a $5,000 payment, and that would get you all the plans and the mechanical drawings, all that sort of stuff. And you would use that to help get yourself the permits. And the builder would be a part of this as well. The builder might already have contacts and relationships, and you would take that to get the permits. Once you get your permits, that 5,000 goes towards the rest of the building, and the builder would start pouring your concrete slab, and you would make your order with us, and we would begin manufacturing it, which takes about 3 to 4 weeks. So after the slab is built, and it has to be done to specifications because the indoor garden, the garden beds are part of the concrete slab, and the plumbing has to be roughed in for those as well. And it's on a gravity, it's got a grade, like so it's gravity fed through the building, through those, and after it leaves the garden bed, it either goes to your septic tank or sewage if you're hooked up to city sewer. And so
So that's something to keep in mind as well, like thinking ahead, that you're going to have to be connecting the runoff to either a septic or sewage.
correct, yeah. So in terms of the water comes in through the roof into the cisterns, or there's a French drain around the outside of the property that collects it all and then gets pumped up into the cisterns. And then the cisterns is gravity fed through the water panel and the filters into a pressure tank that then puts it in through the house. And then, like I mentioned, the bathroom shower drain, the bathroom sink, and then the washing machine drain in the utility room all go through the garden bed that then flows to the sewer, whether it's septic or sewage. And the kitchen sink and the toilets go straight to sewage. So once you've got started and you're pouring the slab, the previous model, the Echo Green, the average build time was 5 months, but now we've optimized things to give instructions to builders that we think we can get it down realistically to 90 days. And so while the concrete slab that they've poured is drying, it's called curing, we've finished manufacturing, we're now shipping it. The builder is getting everything organized, getting the cisterns on site, all that sort of stuff. Because again, we don't include anything that's locally sourced. We don't include the glass, we don't include the plumbing, we don't include the electrical wiring. We do include the solar kit, so the solar system's provided. It doesn't make sense for us to include cisterns. They're essentially like empty containers, so we would pay, and you can get them from anywhere. But we do include the solar system, and like I said, the whole building's designed to integrate all these into one cohesive whole. And so what happens is all this stuff is brought together and it's on site. And when the container arrives, the external shell of the building will be put together in 3 to 5 days. That's sealed. Then the electrical and the plumbing are done, and then the whole thing is spray foam insulated, and then it gets covered with that black pond kind of rubber lining. And then after that,
Mm-hmm.
you bury it and you put the solar panels on top and you connect it. And now you're good to go. And then it's all the interior finishings after that. And that's where the price on these things can go through the roof, because I had a buddy send me a link to a $9,000 toilet, and you can get marble countertops from Italy for $35,000. So there's no limit to the interior finishings. But that's why we say
Sure.
people just trying to get out of the rat race, start with the basic model. It'll cost you 100, maybe a little more, 100 grand, 120 grand. Even if it costs you $150,000, again, you pay this off in less
Yeah.
than 5 years, and then you're free. And this stuff is built to last. It's not,
But is there a dependency on having natural rainfall there for the water?
to a certain extent, yes, but there are workarounds. Like there's one guy that's in a desert. I forget the name of it, but they've got like
Mm-hmm.
almost no rain. And I told him to do an experiment to buy a dehumidifier and see what happens.
Okay.
And he bought one. He's like, it's full. Like it's getting full. So there's things that are called atmospheric water generators. And essentially what it is, it's a
Okay.
dehumidifier with a water filter attached. So depending where someone
Okay.
is, and if you had, like where I am in the Philippines, we've got 2, 3 months of no rain. So
Yeah.
we would be fine because we could store a month's supply of water. But during that, we would either need to truck some in, or we could have 2, 3 dehumidifiers and just have them running
Hmm.
nonstop. And they're 20, $30 or whatever. So when you burn one out, well, whatever, go buy another one. But you can generate an insane amount of water with that. And that's something that's even recently become really popular in Africa at schools and stuff, are these atmospheric water generators, where they're essentially just pulling it
Mm-hmm.
out of the air. And obviously a well is ideal, super ideal, because you've
Yeah.
got, almost unlimited supply.
Yeah.
Yeah, depending on the person. And even for cold climates, these work in cold climates. The biggest issue with that is you have to put on the warming cables that they use at ski resorts on the roof and the solar panels. So you can flip a switch, melt snow to get water and to prevent pipes from freezing. But the earth berm helps with that as well. So, but it's very conventional living. It's just designed smarter. If you like the idea of gardening, how many people do we see that are spending hours out? I mean, that's part of the appeal of vertical farming is the fact that it waters itself, right? Like,
Yeah.
you don't
Yeah.
have to go out and move the sprinkler every half hour. You don't have to spend an hour there watering pot plants and all that stuff. So it's just smarter living.
I think it's really fascinating, and I think for folks, they'll either hear this, and this is one of those episodes where people are like, "Oh, this is not for me. Like, this is too much work." But then there's people who really are moving down towards this path of sovereignty, really being able, it's something that I become more aware of because I grew up in New York, and I grew up in this. I've lived in New York City. I've lived in a high-rise building, and it's nice as someone who loves the city and loves nightlife to experience that. But I also was there for Hurricane Sandy, where we had a blackout of everything from 56th Street down, no water for a day, no power for a week. And so things get really dicey at that point because you're just like, where's my food coming from? And when you go to the supermarket and there's nothing on the shelves, you begin to remember that food comes from somewhere.
Yeah.
I think, life gives you these adventures and takes you on these paths so you become more aware. So I've lived in LA prior to where I am now in Minnesota. And, my partner's family they're hunters, they're her father and his father, and they were all hunters, and so there's a cooler with like several months worth of venison available, and like I said, they go hunting. He goes up to Alaska, gets salmon from Alaska, so it's like very interesting, and we've just planted a garden. We've got chickens now, so we're not fully off the grid, but I think there's and it's not cheap because obviously you have to make an investment. It's probably the most expensive egg I've ever tasted.
Right. Right.
When you factor what it takes. But I think it's important to decide, how much you want to move down towards that path. And I think, the conversation will resonate for folks that are exploring this. And I think giving people options to that. And I think, part of what we cover here is sustainability, access to
Yep.
food, and not just
Yep.
local food, what we're calling hyper local, because unfortunately now, because the
Yep.
USDA or whatever department allows you to define local as 400 miles
Which
away,
makes no sense.
you can't even
Yeah.
use that. Makes no sense. Yeah. So now we're talking hyper local. We're seeing people like, install like container farms growing mushrooms for these, high end
Yep.
restaurants next
Yeah.
door, to the restaurant, or putting these indoor farms in hospitals or on
Yep.
cruise ships. So now you have access to actually fresher food than you would if you're getting it shipped in 3,000 miles from California. Well, there's a lot of stuff that you covered here, and there's some videos that I want people to look through as well. So we'll make sure you get those all to me, and we'll put those in the show notes. But I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your perspective and what life has been like for you to get you to this point where you see something like this as important in terms of how you want to raise your
Yeah.
family and live your life and gain your own sovereignty. So I appreciate your
Yeah.
time,
No,
Daryl.
it's important. I mean, I've got a client. He does something like $1 million a quarter out of Texas. He's an older gentleman, but even with all that, he's in his 80s now. And even then, he was out of power for something like 36 hours. And he's, like all that money he has in the bank, what's that going to do for him? Like, he can't, he's going to go Home Depot and carry a generator. Like, like it's so some of this it's just smarter. And like you said, it's not necessarily for everyone, but I think more and more and more. I mean, even if you look at Singapore, Singapore is one of the greenest cities that's out there. And whether you think that global warming is happening because cows are farting and burping and because it's carbon, or if you think it's because the pole magnetic field is shifting, whatever you think about that, we just need to live in harmony better. It's undeniable that we're overfishing the oceans. It's undeniable that we're deforesting the planet. It's undeniable that there's an entire continent of plastic in the ocean. There's some of these things that are undeniable. So we just need to be smarter with how we set up ourselves and our lives. And it doesn't mean that it has to be more laborsome. It just needs to be smarter.
Well, I appreciate again you sharing your perspective. And like I said, where's the best place for folks who are just looking for a website to go to? Where's the best place to send them to get them
Yeah.
started? And obviously, we'll have some more.
Yeah, just
supporting.
either search on social media or Google just Oasis Biohome. Put it in as one word. That'll bring you straight to us. Check it out.
Okay,
Let us know your questions.
sounds good. And also the agrocapsules.com.
Correct.
I think this audience will be interested in that as well. Thanks for your time, Daryl. I really
Thanks, man. It's
appreciate
an
it.
honor and a pleasure.